Hello everyone, welcome, and today we're going to talk about Spain and Portugal and their respective empires. My name is William Cooper. I'm the grandson of Frida Cooper, who is an Amica resident that passed away on July 7th of 2023. I miss her, but I'm making my monthly presentations at Amica in her honor. We're continuing our travels to Afro-Eurasia. It covers 57% of the world's land area, but has 86% of its population. We began in the Middle East, then we went to Southern Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, North Asia and Eastern Europe. We began our travels to Western Europe, and last month we continued our travels to Western Europe. Today we finish our travels to Western Europe, visiting Spain, Portugal, and their respective empires. Bon voyage! And next month we're going to start our travels to Northern Europe, visiting the Nordic countries: Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, and Greenland. I hope to see you on the 26th of April. A sizable takeaway from this presentation is how large Spain's empire was. In 1790, this was the peak of Spain's empire, and we can see on this map all these countries in red were owned by Spain. So we have 2/3 of what is now the United States, even British Columbia, Mexico, Central America, South America except for Brazil, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana, and we also have Philippines and their other oceanic assets. So it was really immense. Now in today's story, we're going to learn about how big it got, how this happened, and how they lost it all, as well as Portugal's empire. So let's begin. Today's presentation is divided into 3 different sections, each of which, and the first 2 are based on 1790, how Spain's empire was created and how it was all lost. And we're also going to be talking about Portugal. So section 1, pre-1790. There are 5 parts to this section. So the first part is about Roman control. So starting in 19 BC, Iberia was controlled by the Romans. And Latin, the Roman language, became the base for Spanish and Portuguese, which is why now the Romance languages, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, are all very similar to Latin, and most people who speak French can understand Spanish, and vice versa. And as we all use in these presentations, we have our Roman Empire flowchart. So in 27 BC, it was created. In 395 AD, it split into the East and the West. The East became the Ottoman Empire, and the West was taken over by Germanic tribes and eventually became the Holy Roman Empire. Spain and Portugal were part of the West. Now we have the Visigoths and Islamic periods. So what happened was that in 409 AD, Germanic tribes invaded Iberia, taking over from the Romans. And these tribes helped turn Romanian Iberia into what would soon become medieval Europe. Then what happened was that the Visigoths, another Germanic tribe, were invited to Iberia by the Romans to try to help fight other barbarian groups, but they eventually took control of Iberia. And what happened was that the Suebi then set up a kingdom in northern Iberia, which would later become Portugal. And the Visigoths controlled Toledo for almost 200 years until the Muslims came in 711. Now what happened was that the Muslim Moors conquered Iberia in 711 by crossing the Strait of Gibraltar into Iberia. And this started nearly 800 years of Muslim rule in parts of Spain, especially in the south, which is where Gibraltar is. The Reconquista, meaning reconquest, was a centuries-long process where Christian forces tried to take back Iberia from the Muslim Moors. Now in 868, in a key step of this Reconquista, the County of Portugal was established, the foundation for what is now the modern country of Portugal. And it started under the Kingdom of Leon, which which was the foundation for Spain, but eventually it grew in power, setting the stage for Portugal's eventual independence that we'll talk about soon enough. Now what happened was that in 1031, the Caliphate of Cordoba, a Muslim caliphate, collapsed in 1031, and this was the largest and most powerful Muslim state in Iberia. And this fragmentation resulted in the rise of Portugal and Spain, allowing Christian kingdoms to expand their territories, a key step in the Reconquista. Another big takeaway was in 1085 when the Christians captured Toledo from the Muslim rulers, and this was a game changer in the Reconquista, and the fall became a symbol of Christian victory. So the Reconquista was almost finished. Now we have part 3, the Reconquista and the formation of Portugal. Now what happened was that after 868, as we heard about, the County of Portugal was established, but now it was finalized under the Kingdom of Portugal in 1139. And what happened was that Alfonso Henriques declared Portugal's independence from the Kingdom of Leon, which I previously said became Spain, allowing Portugal to be recognized by Spain and get its independence. In 1143, this was finalized officially. So the Kingdom of Leon recognized Portugal's independence, allowing for the groundwork to be set for the future Portuguese expansion and development. The Christian conquests of Cordoba and Seville were major milestones in the Reconquista because these cities had been centers, key important centers under Muslim rule. And in Portugal, the capture of the Algarve in 1249 finalized its Reconquista. In 1469, because of marriage, the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon were united by Ferdinand and Isabella, allowing them to rule most of Iberia. From 1478 to 1834, there was the Spanish Inquisition, an effort by the Spanish monarchy to consolidate its power and keep its country Catholic. So the rulers asked the popes to catch any Jews pretending to be Christians, and in 1492, all Jews were asked to leave. In 1502, they also asked every Muslim to leave, and they also claimed Protestants were faking Christianity too, because they only wanted Catholicism in their country. However, most trials against non-Catholics only ended with people changing their beliefs and being freed. And the Inquisition eventually slowed down and was abolished in 1834. Now we have one of the biggest parts: exploration and expansion. So I've divided this into some small parts about Portugal and some larger chunks about Spain. So for example, here we have Portugal establishing a trading post in Ghana in 1482, its first African colony. In 1492, arguably the biggest event in exploration happened. Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic and found the New World in 1492. He was backed by Spain, although he was Italian. So this helped open up territories in the Americas for Spain to eventually colonize. And fun fact, he was actually searching for a western route to Asia because at this time the Europeans wanted a lot of Indian spices. So they thought, if the world is a globe, I can just sail around and I'll get to India. Well, they were right about it being a globe, but they didn't know that we have 7 continents, not 5. So then they got to find the Americas. Imagine if a treaty decided that half the world would go to one country and the other half to another. That would never happen, right? Well, it did, and it was called the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 between Spain and Portugal and Pope Alexander VI. So he basically said, Spain, you get this chunk of the world, Portugal, you get this part, allowing Portugal to get Brazil and parts of Africa and Asia, while Spain got the Americas. And it looked a little something like this. So in red we have Spain's territories, and in blue Portugal's territories. But as we all know, we're not all speaking Spanish in the Americas, and in Asia and Africa, not a lot of people speak Portuguese. So almost no one actually respected this. In 1498, another milestone happened. Vasco da Gama reached India, and he established a direct sea route from Europe to Asia because the Europeans just can't get enough of those spices, and he secured Portuguese dominance in the spice trade. In 1510, because of this, Portugal got to establish a colony in India called Goa, which remained Portuguese until 1961. Now we have section 5, part 5, Habsburg Spain and the rise of Portugal. So in 1500, Portugal discovered Brazil, and they were able to claim it because of the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which had previously granted it to them. And the early exploitation here was about Brazil wood, a rich natural resource prized for its red dye, and this is the kind of trees that they would extract it from. Eventually, Brazil became the biggest importer of African slaves, so that 40% of all African slaves went to Brazil. In 1505, Portugal colonized Mozambique in Africa, expanding their presence in the Indian Ocean trade routes. In 1571, they got Angola as well. In 1511, Spain colonized Cuba, its first major colony in the Americas. And this was the settlement of Baracoa, and it was governed from New Spain, which was in Mexico City. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon landed on Florida's coast, claiming it for Spain. And from 1516 to 1558, Spain was under the rule of Habsburg King Charles I. Now, I previously talked about how the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon were united. Marriage. Well, basically same exact thing here, because he got the Spanish kingdoms from his mom's side, and the Habsburg part from his dad, who was the son of Holy Roman Empire Maximilian I. And during Spain's rule, Spain's empire grew massively, covering Europe, the Americas, Asia, and even the Holy Roman Empire, because he was their king. Now, one of Spain's most important colonies was in Mexico, which they got in 1521 after conquering the Aztec Empire. And Mexico was so important because it was rich in so many natural resources, such as gold. And eventually this colony would expand to cover what are now the American states of California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, and a bunch more, as well as almost all of Central America. They also got Peru in 1533 by conquering the Inca Empire, and it became a major Spanish colony. And the Philippines were also under Spanish rule for over 300 years, until 1898, after Spain's loss in the Spanish-American War, which we're going to talk about very soon. Now, for 60 years, Iberia was one country, the Iberian Union, between Spain and Portugal. And I'm sorry, whoever designed that flag, I don't know what they were even thinking. So it was a political union between Spain and Portugal. Although they were under the same monarch, they were still separate kingdoms with their own institutions and laws. Now, how it happened was that in 1580, Portugal's king died without an heir. So King Philip II of Spain took advantage of that because he actually had a claim to Portugal's throne because his mother was Portuguese. So what happened was that he also became king of Portugal, eventually uniting Iberia for over 60 years. Now, how it ended was with the Portuguese Restoration War from 1640 until 1668, because the Portuguese were dissatisfied with how the Spaniards were treating them. So in 1668, after the Treaty of Lisbon, Portugal's independence was restored and it became independent. From 1701 to 1714, there was also the Spanish War of Succession because after Charles II's death in 1700, there were no heirs. So European powers fought for control of Spain, and what happened was that the Bourbon dynasty took over. In 1759, more about the Americas and Spain. Spain got Louisiana. What happened was that during the French and Indian War, France knew that it was losing, and they didn't want Britain to get Louisiana. So what they did was they gave it to Spain in a secret deal. At the end of the war, France lost, and they had to give the rest of their territories to Britain, but this did not include Louisiana. Now we have section 2, 1790 to 1914. The empire had become so big, how did they lose it? And this section has two parts, one half about Spain and the other half about Portugal. So the first one is about Spain. So I've already showed this map, but in 1790, Spain controlled 9% of the world in North America, Central America, South America, Asia, and Caribbean. And it was so immense that all these countries were under Spanish rule. Now, the first nail in the coffin was in 1800, where France regained Louisiana in a secret agreement, and in exchange, Spain got Tuscany. And honestly, that was not a very fair deal for them, considering the fact that there are 15 states in that purchase, but speech their own. So in 1808, Napoleon forced Spain's king to abdicate, allowing his brother to get in. That doesn't sound very kind, but sure. And this sparked the Peninsular War. Spanish forces, aided by the Brits, fought against French occupation because the Brits and the French were still major enemies. In 1813, at the Battle of Victoria, there was a decisive victory for Britain and Spain, and this collapsed France's rule of Spain. Afterwards, what happened was that in 1814, Spain's king made a comeback. He was restored, and so although Spain became independent, the war still left Spain economically weakened. And this marked the beginning of Spain's decline as a European power. So this war was actually incredibly important. Now, another huge loss was after the Mexican War of Independence, 1810 until 1821, where they lost Mexico on September 27th of that year. Now, so although we're going to talk about Mexico in about a year or so, I just want to talk about how large Mexico was as a country. So it had Mexico, but it also had California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Wyoming, all those different U.S. states, as well as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. So U.S. states as well as a bunch of Central America. Now, a little bit more about Mexico. In 1835, they lost Texas, and as every Texan will tell you, Texas was independent for an entire decade until 1845 when it joined the U.S. And this made Mexico incredibly upset. So there was the Mexican-American War. Because of first U.S. expansionism, America had just taken a former piece of their territory, and secondly, a border dispute between the U.S. and Mexico, which we can see on this map. As this purple region was disputed territory. Also, the U.S. had a lot of focus on Manifest Destiny, which they still do, and they wanted to gain more territory in the West. Now, the U.S. won this war decisively, and Mexico lost Texas, New Mexico, and California, but the U.S. still paid them $15 million as a little bit of a settlement. In 1853, the U.S. was still not done because in the Gadsden Purchase, they paid Mexico $10 million to get that small piece of yellow territory, and this allowed them to construct a southern railroad, and also marked the final adjustments in the Mexican-American border. In 1898, America was still not done fighting Spanish speakers because there was the Spanish-American War, sparked by the explosion of USS Maine in Cuba, which they said Spain did, but really they didn't. It was found out to be an accident a couple decades later. And the U.S. quickly defeated a dying Spain, leading to the Treaty of Paris, where they lost the Philippines, as well as Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Guam. And this war ended the Spanish Empire in the Americas. Now, after all this, how bad could Portugal been? So, in the 1800s, there was the decline of the slave trade, as we can see in this graph. It all went crashing down. And in 1822, they lost their most important colony, Brazil, because on September 2nd, 1822, Dom Pedro famously declared Independencia or Muerte, independence or death, and this marked the birth of the Brazilian Empire. In 1910, Portugal's monarchy ended, and it became a democracy. Now we have the final section for today, 1914 to today. So, the first part is about the World Wars. So, World War I, how was this caused? Our six main causes that we always say: European expansionism, Serbs wanting independence and control of Bosnia, Franz Ferdinand's assassination and Russia's defense of Serbia, interlocking alliances, the German support of Austria, and finally the German support, the German people's support of participating in the war, trying to reclaim their lost territories. Now, what did Spain do in this war? They stayed neutral, and they were able to benefit economically by trading with both sides. And Portugal in 1916 joined the Allies, and they fought in France, and they defended their African colonies from Germany. Post-World War I. So there were 6 treaties with Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, Hungary, and the Ottomans. In 1923, Spain actually gained a colony by getting the protectorate of Spanish Morocco as part of an agreement with France. From 1926 to 1974, Portugal was under authoritarian rule under Salazar, who formed the Estado Novo regime, new state. From 1931 to 1939, there was the Spanish Republic after their king's abdication. But all things come to an end, so 8 years later, there was the Spanish Civil War between the Republicans and the Nationalists. The Nationalists were led by the guy who we all know, Francisco Franco. Eventually, Franco's side won, and Spain became a fascist dictatorship until his death in 1975. Now, World War II just had to happen right in that year. And since Franco had just gained power, Spain was not ready to fight. So, although it was sympathetic to Hitler, they didn't stay neutral. Portugal also remained neutral. However, they allowed Britain to use their Azores Islands as a critical military base. On September 2nd, 1945, World War II ended with the bombing of Nagasaki. Now we have our final part, the post-war to today. So in 1945, the UN was formed, and Spain and Portugal both joined in 1955. In 1949, NATO was formed. Portugal joined that in 1949 as it was a founding member, but Spain only joined in 1982 because Franco was not really interested in the other Western European countries. In 1956, Morocco gained independence from Spain, and however, Spain still has two small enclaves in Morocco, Ceuta and Melilla, which actually remain Spanish to this day. In 1957, the European Union was formed, and both countries joined in 1986. And in that same year, Equatorial Guinea gained their independence, marking the end of Spain's rule in sub-Saharan Africa. In 1974, Portugal's Estado Novo regime was overthrown, and it became a democracy. And right after this, 5 Portuguese colonies also got their independence: Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, and finally Angola. Spain also got democracy in 1975 with Francisco Franco's death. In 1999, Portugal lost its final colony, Macau, in 1999, which had controlled for over 450 years. Rob Armstrong asks, please tell us about Spain and Portugal in terms of their economy, population, geography, and languages. Well, here's a little snapshot of Spain and Portugal. I also included France and Germany. Spain is a much bigger country. Its population is 5 times that of Portugal. It's much richer. Spain's GDP is 1.6 trillion. Portugal's is about 300 billion. Spain's GDP per capita is about 33,000. Portugal's is 27,000. Spain's capital is Madrid, while Portugal's is Lisbon. Rob Armstrong asks, are there any special Spaniards or prominent Portuguese? Well, there are. First, we have Pablo Picasso, who co-founded Cubism. I was actually very surprised that he only died in 1973. We have Rafael Nadal, a retired Spanish tennis legend. We have Cristiano Ronaldo, who is by many people apparently the greatest of all time in terms of soccer. Questionable. Rob Armstrong asks, what are the key sites? Well, in Spain we have the Sagrada Familia. It's been under construction since 1882. We have Alhambra, which is in Granada, Spain, and it's a palace and fortress complex with a blend of Islamic and Renaissance architecture, and it's called that because in Arabic it means the red one, which is the color of its walls and towers, which are made out of rammed earth, which was a very common building material at that time. We have Ibiza, part of Spain's Balearic Islands, and it's renowned for its nightlife, beaches, and rich cultural heritage. Rob Armstrong asked, what were the famous foods? Now, with Spanish food, you can never ever go wrong. We have paella, which is rice with a little bit of saffron, vegetables, and seafood. Tapas, which are small flavorful appetizers. We have gazpacho, which is a very cold soup. We have churros, which are a beloved Spanish dessert, arguably the best part of Spain. And now Portugal has its balcão, so salted codfish, which is their natural dish, although they could never ever compete with churros. And finally, Rob Armstrong asked, are there any fun facts? Well, there are. First, we have Spanish siestas. We have Spanish bullfighting as well, which is a traditional Spanish spectacle. And now Spain also has 3 large independence movements in Galicia, Basque Country, and Catalonia. Catalonia is the most known. However, 3 sizable regions of Spain want to leave Spain. Spain also has an annual tomato fight. And Portugal has a curving bridge. I believe tomatoes are a lot nicer though. But we have the Vasco da Gama Bridge, which curves because of the Earth's curvature, making it the world's slowest roller coaster. And now, did you know Portugal may have invented tempura because Portuguese missionaries introduced fried green beans to Japan, and Japan refined it, making modern tempura. And now Portugal tried to compete with Spain's tomato fight has its festival for sardines, which in my opinion is a little bit cooler. Now, how do you say butterfly in Spanish? It is mariposa. I'm actually learning Spanish. And in Portuguese, it is borboleta. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Any questions? Yes?
That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.